We've talked in depth about student loan forgiveness, and President Joe Biden, I think this is a really an important story. He has given his first hint that he is looking into forgiving some federal student loan debt. He spoke at the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, and reportedly he's looking to forgive private and public student loan debt. Of course, we all know how that is bogging down so many Americans, especially Black women. And according to the Hispanic Caucus, he did a dialogue about differences between young people who went to public schools or private schools, and he reportedly is interested in doing this. This is the first time he's been this clear. Amisha, this would obviously be a great thing for the midterms, but is he just teasing us at this point? I mean, you've been on this for a while. What are your thoughts on this? And 866-801-8255, what are your thoughts on this idea that maybe this might happen before the midterms?
The pressure campaign is real. We've seen, cracks in the ceiling, so to speak, when it came to Joe Biden moving on student loan forgiveness, at least a certain portion of student loan forgiveness, which was not a starting point for him. Originally, it was to try to do everything he could to change certain parts of the public service loan forgiveness program, the PLSF, to make sure that the income-driven repayment, the IDR plans were redone, because an NPR story basically blew the water on what was going on with IDR and how a lot of people who thought they were paying their student loans, their payments weren't even counted when the servicers changed. I think that this is a president who also is recognizing that he is in deep water. He is in a lot of deep water and can't keep himself afloat. With that being said, the polling numbers are what they are. Joe Biden is not a popular president, which makes it extremely tough for him to go on the road for midterms and actually get other Democrats elected or keep Democrats elected who are currently in office. With that being said, he also recognizes, as we've talked about on this show before, Clay, midterm cycles are cycles often where people who look like us don't show up. So he's going to have to do something that actually gets those populations out. This isn't a presidential election year. And I think that as we continue to see inflation rise, the cost of living rise, and yet, people's incomes are not rising, the student loan debt cannot continue being kicking the can down the road as it relates to student loan debt pause after pause after pause for repayment, because at some point the piper is going to come calling. And unless this president decides that he's going to reduce or relieve a certain amount of debt, then he's going to continue to have those advocacy groups at his door. He's going to continually have people, making those calls and standing in the streets and doing what they need to do. And I applaud them for it. But at the end of the day, I'm going to be more interested in knowing what that number happens to be. This is a president who has said 10K at one point. Honestly, 10K isn't going to do much for individuals who are 50K plus in debt, specifically the average Black female student loan debt. And I feel like we're going to have to see an overhaul of sorts. My organization, Education Trust, has supported all out student loan debt forgiveness. But if that is not on the table, we say at least up to 50K. Because we want to make sure that people have a starting point to actually be able to take care of their families, be able to afford homes, and not have this burden that isn't going away anytime too soon. So we'll see where this president lies on it. But right now, I think that this is also testing the water for midterms.
The other thing too, I think it goes to what we always talk about this, Amisha, messaging. So I'm a little bit confused right now. Allegedly, he can sign an executive order that would wipe out some student loan debt. Allegedly, he can't sign an executive order. Elizabeth Warren says it's an executive order. Joe Biden says this must go through Congress. If it doesn't go through Congress, it's not going to have any strength whatsoever. So you're talking about it, but how would it get done? I've heard some I guess it's very confusing. I've heard some experts say Congress, executive order. I don't know, but how would it get done? So it kind of feels like to me a bit of a dance, because if you're going to do it, how would it get done? And you have powerful Democrats all having a different idea or vision of how they would get this done. Because if it is possible, I want to know the how. If it's Congress, we're effed. If it's an executive order, you can easily have one of Trump's judges overturn it. So what is the how?
So the
How are
how
we going
is
to do it?
this president could always, and we've heard this from Harvard lawyers and others who have investigated it, student loan forgiveness can be done to a certain point by executive order. He cannot all out forgive all debts via executive order, but he can forgive it up to a point. And we've seen this happen before. We've seen presidents prior utilize executive order for various monetary things. Again, not the trillions of student loan debt, trillions of dollars of
Right.
student loan debt that currently exists, but we're looking at what that number is. And this is a president who wants to go through the congressional process. He wants to ensure that there is, buy-in from both Democrats and Republicans. But we all know that that's not going to happen. In the same way that Build Back Better is dead, the agenda to, eradicate student loan debt or even forgive a certain amount of student loan debt is not going to make it past the current makeup of Congress, and definitely not past what we assume will be the makeup come this midterm election, where we'll have more Republicans on the House side. They're going to take the majority, and we quite frankly may have them. We quite frankly may have them in the Senate as well. Because as we talked about on the last show last week, Georgia is still, up in arms about, what could actually happen with that Senate race. With that being said, this is a president who can definitely move on executive order. He does not necessarily want the political backlash that comes from Republicans if he was to do it. I think that he is being very careful and trying to be strategic about the conversations he has. But on that same token, student loan debt isn't going to move now unless he uses the executive privilege he has.
I thought Republicans cared about their fiscally conservative. I thought they cared. I mean, people having trillions of dollars of student loan debt. There's nothing fiscally conservative about that. It's absolutely asinine. Let's go to
Absolutely
a
not, but
call
they're
here. Let's
looking at
go.
the numbers. Like they're looking at the numbers. Talking about Black
Yeah,
women and Black women's student loan debt does not move conservatives. Looking at the fact that a
right.
lot of people who have student loan debt are individuals who came from low income backgrounds. People who have massive student loan debt come from lower income backgrounds or didn't have parents who were able to fund their college education. At the end of the day, conservatives are still very elitist people. And the assumption is that
Yeah,
education should only be provided to the rich and the wealthy, and anybody else who can't afford it, good luck.
right. Exactly. Let's go to Frank from Florida. What's up, Frank?
Well, how you doing, Clay?
Good.
Um, I have a point to make about the student loans. I'm opposed to them, and I want to try to tell you why. I went to school and I paid my loan in full, but I did get approved or I did get accepted at Ivy League school, and I couldn't go. Well, I didn't go because I couldn't afford it. And I would have loved to go on to Boston University because I was accepted and I was excited, but I could not even come close. Now, I could have taken a loan out, but I knew that would be problematic down the line if I didn't get the right job, and I'd have that hanging over my head for years. So I deferred going to an Ivy League school and went to the community college and then went to a state
Yeah,
school
that's what a lot
to
of
get my
people do,
bachelor's
and they
degree.
take out student loans even for community college. Yeah, that happens all over the country.
So
Right.
I did the prudent thing. I thought I did the prudent thing. And now I'm hearing that they just want to forgive these loans for people who can't, I don't know if they can afford to pay them or can't. I know they have it hanging over their head.
Who
And
who are you hearing that from? I mean, this isn't happening anytime. Who are you hearing that from?
Well, I have friends who have student loans and they're making payments on them and they would love to get a forgive. They have jobs and they're making payments on them.
Frank,
But it's
Frank,
not,
I think you've called before, and if you haven't called before, your spirit has called before. So let me just say this. I know people who take out student loans for community college. Uh, it's very hard actually to get your entire 4-year college paid for if you're going to some elite Ivy League college. Most folks taking out student loans, it's for a state school. It's for a community college. It's not just to feel fabulous. So it is wonderful, Frank, that you've paid off your student loans. That's wonderful. But what I think is egregious is that you're saying because I've paid off mine, this is just so selfish. It's so selfish. I mean, Amisha, I feel like we're having a rerun here. If I paid off mine, and Frank, I wish you didn't have to pay all that money. I wish you didn't have to pay that money, but everybody else should suffer as well too with the high interest rate and so on. So the way you sound is just deeply selfish and soulless. And I don't know if you've called before, and if you're waiting around to call radio shows to complain about a possibility, a slight possibility that there might be some student loan forgiveness. You're acting like it's going to be everything. Shame on you. And I'll give you a final comment because I'm a nice guy. Go ahead.
I also want to know, Frank, when you graduated.
Yeah, Frank, when did you graduate?
I graduated in 92.
Much
student tuition has gone up 4 times
100%.
since 1992. 4 times the cost. So, we're also thinking about that in relation to the to the student loan crisis, in relation to the fact that the jobs that were available in 1992, quite frankly, for people who graduated in 08, 09, in the middle of in the middle of the fallout, the housing crisis, were not even able to get jobs. People who graduated during the pandemic, same situation, and wages are a lot lower today on average than they were in 92.
Frank,
I really, Clay, resent that you calling me selfish because I want people to pay the loan. It's their loan; they should pay their debts. But if you,
yeah, how unfortunate.
You always get those people, Clay, and I feel like, and that's why I asked him when he graduated, because most of the folks who are saying that they don't want, other people to have their student debt forgiven, even up to a certain amount, they don't want, you got to pay down to the last dime. If you are to ask those people, are people who graduated back when the average cost of college straight out was $25,000 to $30,000. That is not what is happening right now. And to your point, when you I think very astutely pointed out the fact that, he said that he was accepted to an Ivy League, but then he decided to, because he couldn't afford it, go to a community college, then go to a state school. The majority of people with student loan debt across this country aren't people who have Ivy League educations. There are people who went to state schools. There are people who went to community college. I served in administration for a community college out of Chicago, and the student loan debt there on average was about $35,000. Like, people assume that just because you go to a community college, it's automatically free, and that is not the case. And if you started off from a family situation where your folks could not pay for your education, they're not going to be able to pay for it at the 4-year or the 2-year level. So student loan debt is real, and we have to be honest about it. And that the cost of education in the 2000s is very different than the cost of education in the 90s or the 80s or the 70s.
The other thing too is I think maybe people think that when it comes to student loans, they're just paying for your entire college and that's it. You have to get approved. There's a thing called FAFSA. You have to do it every single year. I know folks that got some student loans their freshman year, they got barely any. Their sophomore year, they had to drop out. This is not like it's an endless supply of money. And if you want to go to Harvard and you'll just get all the money, it doesn't work that way at all. Sometimes if you make a little bit more money, if you go a certain, if your parents make a little bit more money, you're not getting, it's not some bonanza for folks to go to school for free. It's so just ridiculous that folks think that it's just a bonanza for these lazy, shiftless, poor people to go to school.
I just want to know when people declare bankruptcy or other avenues, when they get into a financial crisis, do the people who are able to pay for their homes and not have financial issues, or the people who were able to pay for their cars and not have them, not go through problems, are they also setting up the same argument? Because at the end of the day, congrats to him that he was able to graduate and he was able to pay off his student loans. For anybody who's able to do that, we applaud them. But we also recognize that hundreds of thousands of people across this country, quite frankly, cannot, and it's not for lack of trying.
And it's the same thing when it comes to healthcare, or, well, if I could pay my prescription, why can't somebody else? Shame on you. Just freaking soulless. Let's go to Jay from Ohio, first time caller. What's up, Jay?
Hey, Clay, how are you doing? Hi, Amisha, how are you?
Good, thank you.
I just want to comment one point to that caller who called in, who I believe is a very selfish individual. I want to know where his stance was when they were giving out over $5 trillion in PPP loans, which were later forgiven. I work for a large company, and I'm a controller there. Most of that money that we received was given out in bonuses. So, how can you be against people getting their student loans forgiven, getting out of debt, but you can be for giving money to corporations so they can then go ahead and give that money out in bonuses? Because I guarantee you that individual or an individual who thinks like him was for the PPP loans and was for forgiving them, but is against forgiving $1.7 trillion in student loans, almost 3 times the amount of money. the thing is too, for those individuals who did pay, has there been any discussion about potentially giving them a tax credit for what they did pay? So, you know, obviously, like an individual who owes student loans will have what they were having those forgiven, right, written in the law, as well as give them a one-time tax credit for those who did pay up to a certain dollar amount. Obviously, you can't give a $300,000 tax credit to every individual who paid their student loans if they had that much money for physicians and those higher ed individuals. But why not give some type of tax credit to those who did pay, like that individual who said he paid his student loans off in 92, like he's the only person who had to make decisions in his life based upon the fact that he didn't have money to go to college at the time. I made decisions. I'm sure, as you mentioned, you've made some, and Misha might have made some as well. It just kills me in this society how selfish we can be when it comes to putting people in better positions in life. That's pretty
Jay,
much all I got,
listen,
guys.
thank you, brother. I mean, it is it's heartbreaking. And if you're outraged over student loan debt, possibly, and I stress possibly, possibly being forgiven, but you weren't outraged that the airlines got billions and billions of dollars and furloughed people and never hired them back. And I flew for the first time, well, not for the first time, but like the second time since this pandemic. More expensive. Flights were being canceled because allegedly pilots and flight attendants aren't available. But y'all furloughed these people. Many folks never got their job back, but you're worried about student loan debt when you should be worried about all these major corporations that got corporate welfare and still treating us poorly because they can. When a flight's canceled, I had somebody, his entire vacation was canceled because they don't have enough people to work. What are you talking about? People lost their job.
There were NFL and NBA teams getting PPP loans. There were massive chain restaurants getting PPP loans. There were large consulting firms getting PPP loans. When we talk about corporate welfare, we have to be very strategic about the understanding of it. We have always rewarded the ultra wealthy, and we continue to expand that, continue to create monetary gain for them, meanwhile giving everybody else a chokehold to basically try to figure out their lives. And I think that when we talk about student loans, part of that conversation is if you want people to be self-sustaining, self-sufficient, and be able to contribute to this economy, they have to not feel as though they are one ticker point away from financial ruin. And that's where a lot of people are. And it wasn't just because of the pandemic. The pandemic exacerbated a lot of it, obviously. But for the Black population specifically, across the country, many were in the hole already. And part of that is because of wage discrimination. Part of it is just because of racial discrimination. The other part is because of stereotypes and things like that, and not having the access to opportunity that is available outside of our community. And I think that with that being said, even though we're seeing upticks specifically in Black women graduating from college and grad school, it has not translated into higher wages for that same group at all.